Hello guys, this is CannibalChess, and in today's video we're going to be going over some lines that you can use when defending against the fried liver attack. So both variations that we're going to look at today start after the moves e4, e5, bishop c4, knight c6, knight f3, knight f6, knight to g5, d5, e takes d5. And from here there are three main options that you have as black. So I already made a video about knight to a5, which is the best option. You can check that one out if you want to. But today we're going to be looking at the other two options. So that's going to be b5 and it's going to be knight to d4. Let's just go ahead and talk about b5 to begin with. So this is called the Ulvestad variation, and I'm going to show you all some of the most common moves that you could see. So your opponent could most likely take on b5, in which case you could just take on d5, and now it's a pretty even game. They could, potentially take the knight because they don't want their bishop to get taken. So if they take, then you can just retake, and then it's definitely anyone's game. The computer is suggesting for white that they play queen to f3 or castle, in which case you would just get your bishop out of the way and then you would castle yourself. And I would definitely rather play this position as black just because of all the good options that you have for different moves like these. This knight on g5 is also misplaced now. You could push h6 and then just kick it away. So it's the computer's saying that's better for white, but I feel like going against a human, this is definitely a better position for black. Now going back, let's look at another common move you could see. So they could just take the knight on c6, in which case you would take the bishop. And here there are a few moves that you could see. You could see knight to c3, just developing the knight, in which case the best move would just be to play h6, just to kick away the other knight. And once the knight goes back, then you can simply play bishop to d6, solidifying your pawn structure, and no one's still even attacking this pawn, so your position is completely safe here as black. And another option you could see white playing is maybe queen to e2, just because they're going after this weak pawn on e5 that doesn't have any defense on it. And here you could actually just play queen to d5, and this prevents white from taking the e5 pawn and also the c4 pawn, and it also just puts your queen in the center of the board, so it looks really nice, and this position's better for black for sure. And the last option for white I'm going to go over is just castling, in which case you would just play h6, kick the knight away. After the knight goes back, you could even play e4 here, is the best option for black. And going back to the beginning of the variation, let's say your opponent just wants to continue by developing a knight. You just take the bishop, they retake, and then you play h6 immediately, and your position is basically even here. And the last two ideas I'm going to go over for this variation are the bishop moving back. So if the bishop goes back to b3, d3, or e2, I'm not going to mention f1 because they're probably not going to do that. Any of these moves, you just play knight to d4. It's the best move for any of the three that I just mentioned. And if your opponent decides to castle, then you are in luck because you get this position where you have quite an advantage over white. And now let's go over the second variation called the Fritz variation. And I feel like this one is easier to play as for black just because there's less options, and there are more options that you can get where your position is better as well. So it starts with knight to d4, and obviously the most common move that you're going to see is c3. And after c3, I would suggest playing b5, just because there's only one move that white can play that keeps them basically better in the game, and that is bishop to f1. And I'm sure like 99% of the people that you're going to play against are not going to play that move just because it looks so bad. What they're more likely going to do is probably something like bishop to e2 maybe. And if they play bishop to e2, then you just simply take. So any case where you can take, like let's say that they move their bishop here, you always just take with the knight. So if they move here though, it's a little bit trickier. You play bishop to f5. And so now if they take your knight, then you just take back with your bishop. It's actually much better for black after they take your pawn, and then you just take right here. So that you can get into these kind of positions where you just instantly have a better chance of winning the game. Now let's say back here that they don't move their bishop, and instead they just want to go ahead and capture your knight. Then this is also fine for black. So you just recapture their bishop, and then here they could potentially take the pawn, and then here you could just take their pawn right here. So you could get into these positions where it quickly evens out the entire game. You're already having a discovered attack on the knight, so they'd probably want to like move one of their pawns or their queen over here, and you could just continue that way. And the last thing I'm going to mention in this variation is what if they just go ahead and play d6 and they still try and go for the fried liver attack here, then it's actually perfectly fine to play queen takes on d6, and you allow them to do this this knight takes on f7 move. Then you just play queen to c6, so you go after their bishop. And then here, if they try and take, then it's really bad for them. After you recapture their bishop, they can't even castle now, and you're also eyeing this weak pawn on c2. Now, if they don't take with the knight and they instead play something like this, then this is also still perfectly fine for black to just play king to e7. Your position is still perfectly fine here. And back here, if they castle after you play queen takes d6, then I would suggest playing knight to e6. It's the most playable move as a human. The computer suggesting playing bishop to g4 though, but they're pretty similar, except for this one is a lot more complicated, the line to continue winning as black. So I would just advise not playing this one and instead just going for knight to e6 instead. And that's all I have for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching as always. I hope you found the video helpful, and I will see you in the next one.